Welcome back to LA Fishguys. This is the Algae Filter episode. We've been testing our phosphate and we're going to test the nitrate here in just a second. We've been using an algae filter to try to remove the nutrients from the aquarium. The algae filter hasn't really noticeably given us any benefit, so we've started using a product called phosphate drops or phosphate remover. Essentially, we believe it's a product called lanthanum, and what it's doing is chemically binding with the phosphate molecules in the aquarium, causing the phosphate to fall out of solution or to leave the water and settle at the bottom of the gravel where we can go ahead and vacuum it out. As I mentioned, we've just tested the water. Our phosphate levels are getting pretty darn low, so that lanthanum product seems to be working. In regards to the algae filter, I've received some requests to continue to explore it and even some suggestions to put some screens in there that would be above the water, and it would allow a little bit more oxygen to become exposed to the bacteria and they might do a little bit better job. But as I've mentioned before, this is a service customer's house. It's not a science experiment. And so I, as the service guy, need to come up with the quickest and easiest solution so that I can show some results to the homeowner so he'll continue to move forward in his endeavor with the aquarium. Now you may not be able to see this, but even the homeowner this morning commented that there was slightly less algae growth this time around. So it could be that the decrease in the phosphate levels is beginning to have an effect. Again, all along the corals, or the ones that are remaining in the tank, have all done well, and certainly the fish have done real well. That algae has also done well. But I think that we're slowly starting to turn the corner on this morning. So let me finish those tests. I also want to test for nitrate, and then we're going to go ahead and do another 30-gallon water change after putting some more of that phosphate drops into the tank.
Even though testing sometimes can be tedious or laborious, it's always good to know or to have a reference as to how well water chemistry in your aquarium or reef aquarium is doing. Here we're testing for phosphate, and now we're going to test for nitrate. Nitrate being the end result of the biological process. All the food and waste generated in the tank ultimately becomes nitrate, which in turn creates a rather fertile environment. This tank, even though it started out as a reef tank, actually was a fish tank with living corals in it, because the population of fish became so large and the amount of food that went in became so great, it was inevitable that a nitrate problem was going to occur. And now, 7-8 years later, you see the results in the form of serious algae growth. Most nitrate test kits suggest that you wait 5 to 10 minutes. We can already see by the intensity of the color that our nitrate level is going to be high, much higher than what it should be, which explains our serious algae problem.
The algae filter is still working, and you can see we've got some algae growing in there, but a lot of that Cheeto or however you want to pronounce it seems to have kind of died off, and there's a lot of hair algae as well as some other red and bizarre green algae actually beginning to grow inside here. I don't think this was as effective as I was hoping it was going to be, and I'm sure that there are ways that we can improve it, such as placing screens in here that are elevated above the water level, but the water would drip over, and maybe that added exposure of oxygen, like a wet-dry trickle filter, would make those algae grow faster, make them more effective or efficient. But as I've mentioned, this wasn't intended to be a science experiment, and I thought I would give it a good attempt to see if the algae themselves, without any special tricks, would consume the nutrients in the water. It appears as though it has worked a little bit, but I think I've had much more positive results with the phosphate remover, and pending the results of the test for the nitrate, we may have to pursue a nitrate remover as well.
But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves and only deal with one problem at a time. That's for two reasons. One, if you deal with more than one issue at a time, you may never know what either caused the problem or what it took to resolve the problem. The other reason for dealing with one problem at a time is it allows you to concentrate on one issue. It's possible that the solution for issue number 2 might drastically affect issue number 1. So let's concentrate on one thing, in this case, bringing down that phosphate level. Here we're going to dose some more of those phosphate drops. Now remember, as you dose this, it causes a saturation or precipitation issue in the aquarium, causing the water to temporarily become cloudy as a result of the binding effect that is occurring on a molecular level.
And you can see how the water's turned a little hazy. That's the results of the phosphate drops. They're pushing something out of solution. The assumption on our part is that they push the phosphate ions out of the water, and what we're seeing is the result of that precipitation coming out of solution.
And now with our water testing out of the way, as well as our phosphate drops having been added, we'll go ahead and start with regular service on the tank, which begins with cleaning the algae off those acrylic panels.
So here's the results of our phosphate and nitrate test. The phosphates, I would have to say, about 1 part per million, 1.0 part per million. Kind of hard to judge the color, but 1.0 part per million. Nitrate's a whole lot higher. I would have to say realistically, we're looking at the bottom scale there, somewhere between 30 and 40 parts per million, which is ridiculously high. Looks like we've had some success bringing down the phosphate level, but the nitrates are still quite elevated, and until we can get that down, I'm sure that's just more nutrients for the algae to feed on. So now I need to work on something to bring the nitrate level down.
And in addition to cleaning the algae so you can see into the tank, we're also going to perform a vacuuming of the gravel as well as an attempt to suck out as much of the loose algae as possible. This algae does not come off the rock very easily, but if we can try to siphon out some of it, it'll certainly lessen what's overall in the tank. And vacuuming the sand or gravel at the bottom will help remove some of the debris in the system as well.
So you can see after 20 gallons of water being used to suck out as much of the algae as possible, it wasn't very effective. It doesn't seem to suck off the rock very easily, and using a brush might get it off the rock, but all that's going to do is just spread it out throughout the whole tank, and that's just going to create problems elsewhere. And besides that, you'd end up knocking half of your reef down trying to brush it. And to take each individual rock out, well, if it came down to that, I would just take all the rock out and replace it with brand new rock, and I just don't think the customer's really ready to spend that kind of money yet. So let's go ahead and put our 30 gallons of water back in. So I gotta admit, this is rather frustrating from a service standpoint because I can't seem to get rid of this algae quickly. I don't look that impressive in front of the customer. Thank goodness I've been coming here for 8 years. Number two, from a sales standpoint, I can't seem to sell anything. This is supposed to be a reef tank, and all I'm doing is doing big water changes and selling drops for removing phosphates, where I should be selling corals and such. I guess, to be honest with you, and this is a point that you need to pay attention to, you have to decide, is it going to be a fish tank or is it going to be a reef tank? Because you can't have both. Obviously, the more fish, the more food, the more waste, the greater the nutrient level, and the odds are you're going to have an algae problem, and that's going to create a problem for the corals and a frustration on your part. I guess from a service person's standpoint, the mistake I made was years back, allowing the customer to put in whatever kind of fish he wanted. I guess I'm sales motivated, but again, that's the business I'm in. The longhorn cowfish, the big golden banana eel, there were from some other fishes in here that maybe shouldn't have been the best choices to go into the tank because of the amount of food that they have to consume. I mean, you can put fish into a reef tank. You just want to select fish that don't require you to put food in the tank all the time. Maybe they feed off the reef itself and don't require that extra food. So anyhow, this is the results of what I'm having to deal with now. We'll continue to use the phosphate drops, and we'll continue to do the big water changes, and hopefully this algae filter will come around someday. It's too bad that Caulerpa is illegal and difficult to get, because personally I thought it grew a whole lot faster, and in the past did a much better job of removing those nutrients, but Caulerpa is something that is illegal to get a hold of these days, and so we're left with this chaeto or whatever morpho, whatever you want to call it, kind of algae. So anyhow, here we are. We have the problem. We need to figure out how to resolve it. We'll continue to do so. So it's these particular times where that old saying, keep moving forward, really comes into play. And so until next time, keep on moving forward, and we'll keep trying to resolve the algae problem.
So make it a point to come on back for part 8 and see if there's any results, positive or negative, as a result of using the new phosphate drops, and see if that algae filter has lent itself any more significant improvement to the system, because it's all about moving forward and getting rid of this algae problem.